Vessel Lights Out proudly sponsored by Spartans Law, and this is podcast 55 of the Lights Out Boxing podcast. I'd like to be joined by the most valuable face of Team Lights Out, Mohsin Gulsher, aka Ron. Ron, good afternoon, Giza. How you doing?
It's very well, thank you. I'm looking forward to this. Yeah.
That mug of yours, it's been a while. Before we get started, I just want to send out a friendly reminder to the people, if they haven't already, please make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell for future Lights Out Boxing notifications. And of course, social media platform links are below in the description. And if you're on your way to work or you're in bed and you fancy just killing time, if you want to listen to this on one of the audio platforms, again, links are below in the description. We apologize, we've not brought you any Lights Out Boxing content for a while. For those of you who do know, I've been blessed with a little boy, a baby boy, a couple of months ago. So life has been hectic. And Ron suspended the last few months. Just been unable to get hold of him, really. Doesn't want to answer my calls, can't get him to come play.
Listen, mate, Matchroom, IFL TV have been, sniffing around me. So I've been trying to, I'm like, look, I'm loyal to Lights Out. I'm sorry, I'm staying here. So I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be doing it, none other than with yourself again.
I'd like to correct the viewers out there. They've been sniffing him around him because he's been on their case. So it's the other way around. So, look, at the end of the day, we pay a very respectable wage. Ron gets his freebies from Lights Out. He gets to meet all these boxing stars. I don't know what he's complaining about, but look, Ron, that's a story for a different day. We'll have to sit down and talk about this at some other time.
Can I do a little shout out before we begin our show today as well? With one of our boys, Luke Walsh.
Yes.
It's his big day. So I think from everyone that Lights Out, would wish him congratulations on tying the knot with his lovely missus, Abby Potter. So we wish him all the best.
Yeah, congratulations, Luke. Well done to you, mate. I hope you and the missus have a very successful marriage. I hope the wedding day goes well. I know Luke doesn't drink, but I hope everybody else around him is having a couple as well. But no, listen, congratulations to him and Abby. And I hope, I hope they have a great day, and I hope the honeymoon goes well. And again, I hope they're blessed with a good marriage, and hopefully we'll catch up with Luke at some point, because he's probably he's going to be in the honeymoon phase for quite a while. Ron, how long these things tend to last. You've been married 6 times. So yeah, anyway, let's get cracking. Ron, there's so much to talk about. As I mentioned, we've not been able to do any Lights Out podcast for quite a while due to having, the birth of my son. You've been busy with work. You've come towards the end of the school term now. But there is so much to talk about, and there's a lot of topics to discuss. And we're going to have to start off with the number one topic, which has been going around in boxing now for a couple of weeks. And that is obviously rumors are that we're set to get a fight between Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn. Now, any hardcore boxing fan will know the history and the legacy behind those two names. We were blessed in our time to see Chris Eubank Sr. and Nigel Benn fight twice in what were 2 tremendous fights. If you haven't seen those fights as a boxing fan, then you really are missing out on tremendous boxing footage. They were 2 of the greatest fights that I've seen. But the rumors are their sons are going to go at it. Now, a lot of people have got mixed opinions about this fight. So, yeah, Ron, I just want to get your thoughts on it. The rumors are that there's a press conference next Thursday to announce the fight, and that the fight will happen towards the back end of the summer. What's your thoughts on this actual fight itself, Ron?
I think if you recall, when you first raised this possibility of them two facing off, I kind of rubbished it. I was like, no, it's not worthwhile. I wouldn't entertain it. But when they started talking about at what weight they could fight at, just bear in mind that Chris Eubank Jr. Has fought at 168 at one point, or he's a big guy, and Conor Benn is at started at 140, or now he's up to welterweight 147. they've come to an agreement that they're gonna. I think the catch weight that they've agreed is 155 or 156. So, who does that favor more? I'd still side with Eubank Jr. So, but what you've just mentioned before, the history there with the fathers kind of having 2 fights themselves, 1 draw, 1 win for Chris Eubank Jr. So, the Benns want to even up the score here. The fathers unfortunately couldn't get back in there for the 3rd time, but the sons are taking up that mantelpiece instead. It's going to be fireworks in the build up to it. 2 very contrasting characters, aren't they? With how they approach their fights and their mentality. And I thought I would never see it because I thought they were miles apart in terms of weights, but it looks like a reality. And I'm, first I dismissed it, but I'm really looking forward to the actual possibility of this fight happening.
I mean, there's a lot of legacy behind the fight. You can't deny that. The fathers had 2 great fights. They had a great rivalry. I remember watching a documentary of Barry Hearn saying one of the biggest disappointments in boxing is, well, obviously in his time, is that we never got to see a 3rd fight between those 2. You kind of are sort of getting a 3rd fight, but except it's a different generation and it's both their sons.
Yes.
However, I think the biggest in this, as you just mentioned, has to be the weights. Eubank Jr.'s fought at 168 pounds. Conor Benn, I believe, has campaigned at super lightweight. Listen, I think because of the legacy behind the fight, there is a lot of hype surrounding it, but from the people I've spoken to, there's a lot of people not happy with the fight. Because you look at it, we were all hoping that this would be the year where we'd see Eubank Jr. finally fight for a world title and get in the ring with, I don't know, a Golovkin or one of the Charlos or Andrade, and then we were all hoping.
Yeah, they both were building their legacies in their respective weight divisions, middleweight, super middleweight, and welterweight. So this has caught us blindsided, in fact, that this fight is even taking place. And there's fights out there for both of them, but they're choosing not to take them, but rather have this fight. And I take it that money talks. This is going to be box office. You can't imagine it to be anything less.
I mean, I just like the question that gets me is what does Chris Eubank Jr. gain from winning this fight? If he does win this fight, of course, which, I know
he was supposed to win it. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. But what does he gain from it? I just think, that both fighters are in 2 different stages of their career.
You asked, what does he gain?
Yeah, he gains a payday, but in terms of
a massive payday and another rematch as well if it's a close fight.
Yeah, but I mean, if we're talking about, you already talked about rematches. We don't know how the first fight's going to pan out. I think you kind of look at this situation. It's kind of similar to Errol Spence when he fought Mikey Garcia. A lot of people believe Mikey Garcia would climb up in weight and beat Errol Spence, and it was a complete mismatch. And I just think where Conor Benn is in his career right now, yes, he makes a paid out of it, but I just think it's not the right fight for him. I think he's got to look at other fighters. There's fighters such as,
Virgil Ortiz,
Jared Boots Ennis. You've got Michael McKinson, which I think is a very good fight. And, he is 1 or 2 wins away from a world title shot, I believe. But, I still like the idea of him fighting a Furman. I still like the idea of him fighting Adrian Broner. He's got nothing to lose going into this fight, but I can't understand why Chris Eubank Jr. would even entertain this. I mean,
that's interesting you say that, but if he's got nothing to lose, but look what happened to Kell Brook after he stepped up in weight against Triple G. He wasn't the same fighter.
He was never the same fighter.
He's never the same fighter. Could that happen potentially with Conor Benn?
I mean, it could do. Listen, I mean, we know Chris Eubank Jr. is a powerful puncher. He's got a good KO record. I can't see Conor Benn stopping Chris Eubank Jr. because Chris Eubank Jr., I don't believe he's even been put down in his career so far. So I like Conor Benn. I'm a massive fan of him. I think the last few years he's come on tremendously. He's grown as a fighter. And I go by what Tony Bellew said. He is not Nigel Benn's son anymore. He is the Conor Benn. He's gone from being Nigel Benn's son to the Conor Benn. But I just,
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
listen, look, if Conor Benn was to lose this fight, it's not a bad thing for him because he stepped up in weight. He's gone in with a much bigger opponent, with a bigger name in the sport. You know, he can only gain, you know, experience, respect from this fight if he was to lose. But there is a lot of danger behind this. You know,
Of course.
Junior could hurt him. You know, Kell Brett was never the same fighter when he fought Golovkin. You know, I believe Amir Khan was never the same fighter after he fought Canelo. So I don't know, but I just think, like, if I was Roy Jones Jr. right now and I was the Sauerlands, in Sky Sports, they're promoting Chris Eubank Jr. right now, I'd be wanting him to get in the ring and fight for a world title, and whatever that of a world title shot is, then I'd look at a Conor Benn.
I mean, there was I don't know if you saw it recently, Andrade kind of released a video pretty much saying, don't take that Eubank fight, Conor Benn fight me. You know, there's a world title potentially on offer there. There is a world title on offer there. That's what he's desperately seeking. You know, he wants recognition as a boxer, not as Chris Eubank's son, kind of thing. You know, he wants to make a name for himself. But how is he going to do that? Is leaving a legacy by winning titles. I think this delays that by another 6 months or so. But you know, and if there's a rematch, then there's another year gone down the drain. Then. And
I also see on Twitter that Chris Eubank Jr. mentioned Jake Paul in his tweets, and he said, after I beat if you can get past Hasim Rahman Jr., let's make it happen. I'm just thinking to myself, why would you entertain a fight with Jake Paul? Okay, I get it. Fine. The Conor Benn fight is a big payday. There's history behind it with their fathers, but you're sort of just what is he in boxing for? I don't understand. I mean, I
find it embarrassing as you know, someone like Eubank Jr. calling out a fucking YouTuber. Like, let the YouTuber call out these on the fringe boxers, or you know, people who are trying to make it, or that makes sense. But someone who's established, who's been in with world level athletes, why waste your time?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I do believe the fight with Conor Benn is now going to happen. The rumors are there's going to be a press conference next week to announce the fight. I think there's going to be a lot of hype surrounding the fight. I think that both fathers will play a massive part in the fight as well.
Okay. I am looking forward to that. The dad dynamics, are they going to be in each other in their sons' corners?
I mean, look. I mean, you remember the memorable contract signing between the fathers. It was live on television. Let's have some parliamentary.
Oh my god, I absolutely love that. I'd love for them to reenact that out, you know, in the club they're off or something.
You sort of remember, I believe it was the second fight when the bell rang and they just both stood there looking at each other. You know, it was a fantastic rivalry, and I think we do have to kind of give respect to both fighters from one point of view, that they are sort of rebuilding that, you know, that fire from the first two fights that their fathers had. So they are rebuilding the rivalry.
I want to ask you one last question. Okay, Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr.
Yeah.
Are they similar to their fathers? How they fought, in your opinion? Do you think their styles mirror how their fathers fought?
I think Conor Benn is. I don't think
Conor Benn
is. I mean, when you look at those two fighters, the fathers, Chris Eubank Sr. was technically very good, and he was also a powerful puncher. I don't see much improvements from Chris Eubank Jr. so far under Roy Jones.
No,
I don't see much improvements. I think he's a very good fighter. I think he's very talented, and I do believe he can go to a different level, but I've just not seen it yet. But when you look back at Nigel Benn's career, the fights with the Gerald McClellans and the two fights with Eubank Sr.,
Mohsin as well, yeah.
And then you look at Conor Benn, you know, he wants to have it in the ring, and his father, you know,
very much, yeah. That's what I was thinking. That
a lot of similarities with both Nigel and Conor, very similar. They both want to have a scrap. You know, they both want to engage with their opponents. You know, I believe it was Conor Benn's fight in Leeds. I can't remember who was it against. He was trying to just, like, get his opponent to come forward and engage with him. And I saw that in his father, watching his father fight as a young man. But there are similarities with Conor and Nigel. I just think Chris Eubank Jr. and Senior were two different fighters. I can't see the Chris Eubank Jr. and his dad. I just don't see it in the ring. But listen, I do believe with bigger and better tests, we might get to see a better side of Chris Eubank Jr. And those tests are the Golovkins, the Charlos. I still believe Liam Smith is a very good fight for him. I generally thought that would be a good fight. I believe Canelo would be a good test for him and a Billy Joe Saunders rematch. But if we are going to get this fight, which I believe we will, let's try and embrace it. Even though we have our opinion and even though we believe both fighters are on another level to each other,
sure,
there's a lot of history behind it. But look, let's move on because, as I said, we've got a lot to discuss in podcast 55. Tyson Fury released a video on his social media the other day. Now, our last podcast, we were discussing, is he retired or not? And I think we've both come to, it's pretty clear he's not retired because he said in his last video that he is willing to fight Anthony Joshua if he beats Alexander Usyk, but the fight has to be for free. So what does that mean? That means both fighters don't get a fee out of the fight. It can't be a box office event and all tickets are for free. Now, I just want to say, before we discuss what Tyson Fury had to say, that this is the biggest fight ever in boxing, in my opinion. This is the fight everybody wants to see. It's the fight that the fans from Britain are calling out for. They want to see Fury versus Joshua. But I have to listen, I'm Tyson Fury's #1 fan. I love him. I think he's the best heavyweight on the planet. Fighting Anthony Joshua for free, it just doesn't make sense, does it?
I mean, it was not long ago that he said he wanted 500 million. But make up your mind, Tyson. Do you want the biggest payday or do you want to do it for free? So, he's kind of jumping in between. I think he's just toying with the social media and the press. Is he retired? Is he not? Is he fighting Francis Ngannou? I don't know. I mean, it's just like bloody hard to keep up with Tyson Fury. He's enjoying life right now, as he should, after reclaiming the WBA, against Dillian White. So, but AJ can't be thinking about that. He's got bigger fish right now to fry. And we know August the 20th. Then we can ask those questions, right? When can we have that match? Can we have that fight? That big anticipated, what the UK is demanding and is crying out for, all out, all the marbles, British heavyweight kind of fight. We will wait and see. I mean, I'm taking it with a pinch of salt. I'm not going to read too much into that for free. It's a business.
Well, for one, I don't believe that fight is going to happen this year because I don't see Anthony Joshua beating Alexander Usyk in the second fight. And number two, I can see Tyson Fury going on a complete different path. I don't see the fight with Usyk happening either.
It's a shame.
I think Tyson Fury is now going to branch out outside of boxing. I believe yesterday he started sponsoring his local football team, Morecambe, whether they're Morecambe City or. But he's got involved in his local football club, and he's always spoken about going back to the WWE. He's called out Bjorn Fornson, or however you pronounce his name. He's obviously, as you said, Francis Ngannou. We called him out after beating Dillian White. I think in terms of wanting to fight Anthony Joshua for free, and then 1 week before saying he wants to fight him for 500 million, I think they're classical Gypsy King mind games. But however, I do think
he's calling the show. He's running the show. So
I don't think he's gonna fight again this year in the boxing ring. I just think that he's got so many opportunities out there.
How long have the WBC given him? I think they said, look, take your time, have a think.
Yeah, but then this is where you have to sort of look at the bigger picture with the WBC. There's so many heavyweights out there right now that could be challenging for that belt. I mean, the one fight I would see right now, if Tyson Fury does vacate, is Deontay Wilder versus Joe Joyce.
Oh, I like that. I like the sound of that.
So I think, look, Tyson
Yeah.
Fury is capable of vacating that belt and coming back and winning it, whether it's 6
Who is sorry, you mentioned Deontay Wilder. Who's he rumored to be fighting on his comeback fight? Because there's been a few that they've offered. Chisora I've heard as well, but I don't think that's going to happen. I wouldn't put, if I was Eddie and I wouldn't put a Chisora in with Dillian White. With Deontay.
Why wouldn't you?
Well, it's like taking a lamb to a tiger, isn't it, or a lion? It's just gonna.
Chisora's capable of beating Deontay Wilder.
No.
Why?
Just the extreme power. I think Chisora's coming to that point. Fair play. He beat a Pulev, but Pulev, kind of coming on a bit. Is it towards the end of his career? Yeah.
You don't think Derek Chisora is capable of beating Deontay Wilder?
No.
Yes. I think.
Fair enough. I mean, that could be another good payday for Derek.
Mm-hmm.
People watch that. Could that be box office potentially?
Mm-hmm.
If they promote it right, where could they have it? I'd love to have that in the UK. Which is what was going on about paying bills. He's sending his daughters to private schools and so on. So he's got a few more fights in him.
Well, anyway, let's back on topic.
Yeah.
Tyson Fury.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. There's, like I said, there's loads to discuss, and I'm pretty sure we'll discuss Deontay Wilder and Derek Chisora at one point. I honestly do think that he doesn't fight again this year, and I think he'll take a different path now, whether that's back to the WWE or whether that's
exhibition boxing, MMA, maybe question marks.
And you know what, Ron? And again, I don't want you to think, oh, great, Tyson Fury's #1 fans going on another rant. I just think, look, because of his journey back into boxing, all the trials and tribulations, losing the weight, getting his boxing license back. If he does decide to actually call it a day and wants to try something else, good on him, because his journey back into the sport has taken a lot out of him. You can tell that he generally does need a break. I mean, I watched an interview with him and he said since he's been back in the gym, going back all the way to 2017, he's not taken longer than a week away from the gym, and that's including after his fight. So the guy's worked tremendously hard. I think now is the right time to maybe take a break. I mean, I watched Frank Warren's interview the other day, and he said he doesn't want to see Tyson come back in the ring after 2-3 years. If he's going to fight again, he needs to fight now. But I still
strike while the iron is hot. I think that'll be what I would say with you're on the high. If you are 2 fights, either Usyk beats Joshua in a rematch, take that, and then you could fight Joshua as your last fight, and then you could retire on your throne and say, I am the undisputed, I am the best ever in this era that we're in today.
Well, either way, it's going to be interesting what happens next with Tyson Fury, but obviously the rematch between Anthony Joshua and Alexander Usyk could play a massive part in his next move. I mean, would he like the idea of potentially fighting Alexander Usyk? Who knows? But again, as I said, there's a lot more to discuss on this podcast. And the next topic we're going to discuss is obviously the countdown for September the 17th, the trilogy fight between Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin. A lot of needle in the press conferences. There's really quite a bit of hatred. I wouldn't say much from Golovkin, but you can see Canelo's fired up. And I think watching these press conferences between the two, you were getting a pissed off Canelo. One of the reasons being he lost his last fight to Dmitry Bivol. He claims that Golovkin's not on his level anymore, and that Golovkin's just looking for a payday, as Canelo likes to say. But it is a third fight. Both of the first 2 fights were phenomenal fights.
Yeah, I mean, the debate depends on who you asked, who won.
Yeah, well, let's not debate about that because obviously we could be here longer than expected.
That's another podcast in itself, but yeah, carry on.
But we are going to get the third fight. It's on September 17th. What have you made of the press conferences and what's gone down so far and the needle between these two?
I liked a few Triple G's rebuttals, what he said about why he's so angry, because must have been something he ate, or kind of alluding to the fact about his steroid use or whatever it was, or clenbuterol, or I can't remember what it was. So look, this is world championship boxing. They're gonna try to get that edge, because there was little to. I mean, we can debate who won the first and second, but there was very little to separate those two in the middleweight division. Canelo was clearing out that division, beating everyone in front of him. But there was a man, Canelo, in Triple G, that he couldn't knock down, or he couldn't completely dominate and bully as he did before. So time has passed. It's been, I can't remember when that second fight was.
2018.
2018. So 3 years have gone. So does Canelo have a point there that, Triple G is not the same fighter that he was 3 years ago? Triple G has been kind of keeping himself ticked over with, these fights he's taken. But, we don't know really whether it will be the same. Obviously we know Canelo's come on really well despite losing his last fight, but Canelo's taken it to new heights. He's kind of stepping up in weight, so you can excuse him for not having a great day against bigger fighters. So
I just think, because of obviously how you just backdated the last fight, and then you look at what both fighters have done since the second fight. Canelo's become undisputed king at 168. Last year he beat 3 undefeated fighters to become the undisputed super middleweight champion.
So yeah, he's upped his game, man. Yeah, so you can't knock that.
Golovkin, he's beaten Derevyanchenko, and I think his last fight was against Murata, and he stopped Murata as well. But I just think because of Canelo's, activity and the level of opponents he's been in, just going to be too much. Golovkin's 40 plus. He's going.
Is he 40? Yeah. Wow.
It's just a big mountain to climb for me, if you ask. I can't see Golovkin knocking him out, and I can't see
Canelo knocking him out.
No, there won't be no knockdowns. Both
no.
have got tremendous chins. You look back at the first 2 fights, they hit each other with everything, including the kitchen.
Best chins in the business, both of those two.
Ron, you've only got to watch the first 2 fights to realize how good their chins were.
They didn't even flinch. That was the thing. When I saw some of those punches, I mean, I saw when that same punch that he knocked out Amir Khan. He was obviously, Amir Khan's a lot smaller guy. Triple G just shook it off and just carried on like nothing had happened. Like, wow.
We have to give credit to Golovkin where credit's due. He's been tremendous for the sport. But one thing I don't want to see in this third fight is Canelo carrying him, because there is the danger of that happening. As I just said, you look at the level of opponents that Canelo...
I don't think that's going to happen. I think Canelo wants to make a statement. He's lost that last fight against Bivol. And he's a cash guy, Cal. He's the one, he's the golden boy. He is the pound for pound on the top 10 rank, so he's not going to carry him. He's going to make a statement here. If he can finish him off convincingly, puts all those doubts that people had about those fight 1 and fight 2. Okay, despite Triple G being in his 40s or I mean, I'm not sure aware of how old he is. I'd take that. If I'm Canelo, I'd take that. I'd make a statement here.
I mean, again, listen, Canelo's got more to lose than Golovkin in this fight, 100%. If Canelo was to lose,
2 back-to-back fights,
it could damage him. Maybe people might start questioning how much has he got left in the sport. But you look at the first 2 fights. Golovkin, I don't think, put a foot wrong in those fights. Neither fighter did. However, having said that, I believe the first fight Golovkin won, and I believe the second fight was more of a draw than the first fight. But Golovkin's 2 performances in the first 2 fights were pretty much spot on. I don't think he did much wrong, and he still doesn't get the decision in any of the fights. So it just makes you think, what does Golovkin have to do to beat this guy? And that's knock him out, and it's not going to happen. But listen, the press conferences have been good so far. The build up to the fight is going to get better and better. Fight, we're getting to see these 2 go out for a third time. We can't complain. It's going to be really, really exciting. We'll move on now. We'll talk about another topic on today's podcast. Ryan Garcia picked up his win against Javier Fortuna last weekend. But now he's calling out a 44 or 45-year-old Floyd Mayweather.
I think that was tongue in cheek. That was. I think.
No, we got to discuss it now.
Oh God.
Mayweather said on an interview that he might even be willing to fight again. And
What, professionally against
well,
what, someone with an actual recognized record or a world level boxer?
If someone offered you millions and millions of dollars to go and kick some guy's head in Japan and Korea for 3 minutes, you and I both would do it straight away.
Yeah.
Said that.
Oh no, look, I think Floyd.
No, we've got to discuss the topic. Ryan Garcia.
Fine. I mean, let's discuss this hypothetical topic.
Look, Ron. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
you can look at it two ways. You could think, what a brave guy. You could think, what an absolute bellend. I mean, what does he gain out of fighting Floyd Mayweather apart from a payday? I still think Floyd Mayweather would kick Ryan Garcia's ass. The point I want to make is what is wrong with the so-called four kings? I mean, okay, you can exclude Devin Haney and George Kambosos from this. You got Teofimo Lopez who's moving up in weight. Lomachenko, we don't know what's happening with him. The fight.
Shakur Stevenson also entering that division as well.
Announced his next world title defense against Constantine. I mean, the fight now to be made is Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia. That is the fight that needs to be made for those two fighters.
Without doubt.
The winner goes on to the next level. The other guy just has to sort of rebuild. It's not a difficult fight to be made. I mean,
right.
Floyd Mayweather, it doesn't sit right with me. I mean, come on, Ryan. I mean, you're a talented fighter. You and I both sat with each other when he beat Luke Campbell, and we said this kid is ready for that next level, and he hasn't.
Well, Ryan Garcia's ballsy. I mean, I've got to give it to him. He fell out with Canelo and his team, didn't he? He was training there with him, and Canelo said, this guy doesn't train as well as he should do, to be at the level that he wants to be at. But Ryan Garcia, is he working with Joe Goosen at the moment? Ryan Garcia. So that's quite interesting. So, I mean, it came really well for them in that fight against Javier Fortuna. I think he dominated him, and Fortuna, he's a former world champion as well. So we can't forget that. So that's another good tick in Ryan Garcia's kind of book. But the next fight is got to be, without doubt, against Tank. There is no other fight. If that division, we'll spoil for choice in that division. I mean, there's Lomachenko. People are kind of not talking about him as much anymore now. You mentioned about Kambosos and Devin Haney. They've got another rematch happening in Australia. I'm surprised at that. Although the rematch would have been in the US, but I think maybe it's money talks, I think.
I mean, I remember after the Luke Campbell fight, Ryan Garcia spoke a lot about the Manny Pacquiao fight, and he said that'll be his next fight. That's his dream fight, and that fight never happened. And then obviously he had a few issues outside of the ring, and then he's gotten himself in a bit of pickle with Canelo, Reynoso's gym. I mean, you'd be blessed to be a part of a gym like that, with the talent they've got and how the great reputation Eddie Reynoso's gained in boxing. And of course, when you're working with fighters like Canelo on a daily basis, it's a shame to see how that relationship sort of panned out. But I have no doubts that Gervonta Davis would be willing to fight Ryan Garcia, and I'm pretty sure Ryan Garcia would take that fight as well. But whoever, Oscar De La Hoya's got to sit down with this kid and say, listen, you now's not the time to be going out and calling out Floyd Mayweather. You got to look closer to home. The fights are the Tanks and the Shakur Stevensons and the Lomachenkos. These are the fights he's got to be going for. I just think there's a lot of time being wasted with these guys, in particularly with Ryan Garcia, because the guy's very talented, and all right, maybe he is tongue in cheek, and maybe he is trying to sort of rough up Floyd Mayweather's feathers.
Good PR, man. It makes him relevant. It makes him like, gets us talking as fight fans.
But you're calling a guy who's not had a competitive fight since 2017, and that was against Conor Benn. So do you even label that as a competitive fight? I mean, let's not take the piss here, Ron. I mean, Jesus Christ, these guys have spoken a lot about building a legacy and trying to live up the new kings of boxing. We said it. after that fight against Luke Campbell, that we could be in for one of the greatest eras possible in boxing. And what have we got so far? I think we've had 2 fights, and those were the fights we never expected to happen, which was Cambosis against Teofimo Lopez, which was a phenomenal fight. And then you had Devin Haney go over to Australian fight Cambosis, and the fight never lived up to expectation because it was so one-sided. But I'm just saying, we want to see Tank versus Garcia. We want to see, Garcia versus Shakur Stevenson. Shakur Stevenson versus Lomachenko, I think, is a phenomenal fight. It's a fight I would love to see. Not getting these great 50-50 fights, and I just think some of it is down to management. But I also think some of these fights not happening is down to egos and greediness. And I wish these guys would sort of knock their heads together and say, look, we only
get in the ring, man.
let's not waste these precious years we've got ahead of us. These are guys that we want to see come to the UK and fight. I would love to see one of these. I personally think, I'd love to see a Tank or a Garcia promoted by Eddie Hearn. Really love to see that. Or I'd love to see Sky Sports get someone like Tank or Ryan Garcia and really sort of push their career, because I just don't see their careers getting pushed as much as in America. I do think that, a new face guiding them into a different way would be the best answer for him. But is it going to happen? Only time's going to tell. But as for calling out Floyd Mayweather, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. Fight what's around you. Make the money that you could make.
It's all about. I think that was a sound bite move. I said, because he knows that Gervonta Davis is, Floyd's protege. The next, because Floyd, used to say he's going to be the next best thing. He's going to be, he's going to take over from me, and just Gervonta just needs that one really recognized fight, that name on his record, and that's a perfect fight for the both of them. So let's just make it happen. Let's cut the bullshit. Let's make sure that happens next, and and that will open up so many more doors, and other fighters going to be thinking, shit, we're missing out on this. Let's get involved. I want the winner of that fight. Lomachenko will fight any of them. But let's see what happens.
Only time will tell, Ron. Anyway, we'll move on now to the final topic of today's podcast, and we're going to discuss. The rumors are that we are at the final stages for an undisputed clash in the 147-pound division between Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford. Errol Spence Jr. done an interview, I believe, at the back end of last week, saying that he claims that the fight is now at the final stages of being agreed. I mean, look, it's now or never with these two. They've both beaten what's around them. We're not going to look too much at Virgil Ortiz and Boots Ennis and Conor Benn and any of the other ranked fighters in this division. This is the fight now. I mean, you had Crawford beating Sean Porter. You had Spence beating Yordenis Ugas. Surely now, Ron, this is it now. It really is now or never for this fight.
I really hope so. I think these two have just not. This is the fight that we've all been crying out for. That 147 division has always been exciting for the last few years, for the last few decades, let's be honest. When we had the Pacquiaos and the Mayweathers, if they could have it in the ring, what's stopping these two having it out? And I'm hearing some positive news that November could be that big anticipated clash between these two undefeated fighters, best in their division. Both have shouts to be in that pound for pound list as well, top 5 as well. And I think we're very, very fortunate that this is happening finally.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, mate. I mean, I just think that both fighters are easily in top 5 of the pound for pound list. Both undefeated fighters, both will be Hall of Famers one day. They've beaten everyone around them. They've never shied away from a challenge. I still say it to this day, watching Spence come to the UK in 2017.
Yeah, you're very lucky with that, weren't you?
Performance against Kell Brook was a masterclass. The way he stopped him, how he dug himself out of that hole. Crawford, a phenomenal fighter. This is what boxing needs. This is the biggest fight I believe right now it's one of two of the biggest fights that boxing's got to offer. Do I believe it happens next? I think it does. One of the reasons why, because obviously Crawford doesn't work with Top Rank and Bob Arum anymore. You know, I mean, that just makes me think. I mean, you've got Terence Crawford out there, undefeated fighter, who's on the verge of, you know, fighting for an undisputed title, and no one's looked to snap him up yet. I mean, he spent a few weeks in the UK for the Khan Brook fight. We knew he was involved in Amir Khan's camp. You know, obviously because Bomac was training Amir Khan, but it just baffles me that no one's snapped him up. I honestly thought Eddie Hearn would have looked.
Yeah, I thought that was that was in the offing, but
you know, obviously, you know, whoever they decide to work with, that's entirely up to them. The fight's got to happen next. You know, this is a fight everybody wants to see. You know, and you know what, Ron? I genuinely believe, and I know I'll probably get a bit of stick for saying this, but I believe there's potentially more than one fight involved with these two, because I think the first fight will be an absolute classic. It's not going to be a chess match. You're going to get these two guys dead center, square in the center of the ring, throwing bombs at each other, wanting to prove why they are the king of the 147-pound division. And I think this fight will live up to its expectation. I think it will live up to its hype. And I don't know why we can't get 2 or even 3 fights with these guys, because there's no chance that this is going to be a one-sided fight, given how good these two guys are. Because they're so good, it's going to be tough to break down. I still feel Spence beats him.
Wow.
Listen, Ron, when you talk about the fights you want to see in boxing, that's got to be number 1 on the list.
Oh, I don't that. I mean, I'm surprised that you say it with such confidence that Spence wins. I mean, there's an argument to be. I mean, it is an argument to be made either way, to be honest. But the way you've said it, I would struggle to say who out and out who would be the winner there, because they're like you said, they're that good, both of them, and they've
not got both of them do not have a fault in them. That's the way I see it. There's no mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, let's just hope it happens, because I've become really disinterested in boxing if the best are not fighting the best. You know, I think the world organization need to do more in putting sanctions in place. If just because they're part of different broadcasting kind of companies, you know, like Matchroom or Queensbury or The Zone or whatever it is, they, you know, these boxing organizations say, listen, X needs to fight Y, and that needs to happen regardless, you know, otherwise we're stripping you off and we're going to pass it on to someone else. Do you know what I mean? Do
you know what, one thing?
Do you see where I'm coming from? Because why have we waited this long to have this fight?
You know, you got to look at it from this point of view. I mean, these two guys have been phenomenal since day one in their careers. You know, they've beaten what they've had to do. They've beaten who they've had to beat. You know, they've won, you know, world titles. They've been involved in big box office fights. It would be a shame if they both couldn't deliver this fight. And you don't want to see people slander these two, because they are two great fighters. You know, I mean, you have so much respect for both of them, because, you know, every time you watch him, you feel privileged watching fighters like Spence and Crawford. And the last thing you want is another Amir Khan Kell Brook situation. You know, where they're at the back end of their careers and they're having to fight each other. I remember when, you know, I was up in Manchester and for the Khan Brook fight week, and I was speaking to Adam Smith, and he said, "Look, would we rather have it now than not have it at all, even though they're both at the final stages of their career? I don't want to see this fight happen when they're both at the end of their career. I want to see this fight happen now, when they're in their prime, when they're at their best, when they're knocking over all their opponents. Because let's be honest with each other, most of their defenses, they've come through it with flying colors. You know, I saw Spence being the only time these two, in my opinion, have struggled is when they both fought Sean Porter. But then when you look at how they ended the fight, you know, you had Spence putting Porter down in round 10 or 11, and Crawford stopped him. Do you know what I mean? So they're both at the best stages in their career right now. This is a fight that has to happen. It's got to happen next. It has to happen.
And this fight will be meaningful because it's for all the belts.
Exactly. Now, when
That's it. I mean, you don't want them to be fighting when they've like Kell Brook and Amir Khan, where they had nothing to fight for, but just for pride, really, and a big payday. But
it settles the debate as well. Who's better? Because whoever walks out of wherever the fight is as the undisputed king, there's your answer. You know, so and so is better than this guy because he's now the undisputed king, and they both fought each other, and this guy beat him. And there's only one way to settle that debate in boxing. That's these two guys have got to get it.
I'm going to ask you a question, right? What does the winner do after the fight? If it's not a close fight, if it's a unanimous, very clear, does he move up in weight?
Well, if it's not a close fight, I think that is definitely then again, you look at it, would either fighter want to fight an Ortiz or, a Boots Ennis, a Conor Benn?
That's a different set of problems, isn't it? You know, when you're fighting these up and coming, young, hungry fighters who are just like, put me in the ring with anyone, I don't care.
But Ron, I don't want to slag off the rest of the division, but I don't think anybody below Crawford and Spence beats them. Because
Crawford said about Ennis, he goes, look, he spoke about him very highly, and he goes, look, one day, I'd love to be in the ring with him, kind of alluding to the fact that he's still in the early stages of his career, but he's a fantastic prospect nonetheless. That's a fight I would like to see Conor Benn in against a Jaron Ennis or the Virgil Ortiz.
I think at the end of the day, these two guys, they're not getting any younger as well. I think obviously now it's all about cementing the legacy and obviously making it, which is fine, given what they've done for the sport. So whichever fighter wins the fight, if it's not a close fight, should move up and should look to become the next king at 154 pounds, which obviously is, currently run by Jamal Charlo. And then you've got good fighters in there such as Tim Tszyu. You still got Liam Smith. There's still good fights in there. Chris Eubank Jr., I believe, has said that he's still willing to campaign in that division. But having said that, look, for me, the ideal situation with Crawford and Spence is we get the fight and it's a really good fight and they do it again because there's money to be made in it and there's a massive appeal. There's no fan out. I've never heard a fan out there have anything bad to say about them as boxers. They are just phenomenal fighters. They really, really are just on another level to anyone in that division right now. And I think for boxing, it's brilliant if we get that fight at the end of the year or perhaps the beginning of 2023.
Agreed.
Anything else you want to add?
No. I mean, the other boxing news I'm hearing about, I would like to know if you know anything about it. What's happening with the Jack Catterall and, what's his name again? Taylor. Josh Taylor,
today on Fight Hype, and he believes that's the fight that will happen next.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it's not for the undisputed clash because Josh Taylor's vacated his WBC belt because he didn't want to fight a mandatory because he wants a Jack Catterall fight next. So that means he's had to vacate one of his belts. Fair play to him. It's just sad that we're even talking about a rematch because we shouldn't.
It was gonna be a rematch. If Catterall got that decision, which he should have done, which we all agree, there was going to be a rematch.
Yeah, but we're talking about what's gonna, be the main seller of this fight is the robbery. No one's gonna look back on it and look at how good Jack Catterall's performance was on the night. No one's gonna. That's just gonna get brushed under the carpet. We should the main selling point is gonna be, and it's a shame that it's a shame because you look at what Jack Catterall did that night. He put in a tremendous performance. His best performance. He put Josh Taylor down in his own backyard, and he still did.
Secondly, as well, I mean, if he had got that decision, Jack Catterall would have been making a lot more money for this second fight.
What?
You know what I mean? He has the title holder of all these belts.
Ron Money has
got more leverage, hasn't he?
Undisputed world champion. He should be the undisputed world champion right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I mean, that's it. Financially, he's lost out massively because of that robbery. And Yeah, I think sadly you're right. The rematch, that's going to be the talking point. They're going to be reflecting on that last performance where Jack Catterall had the better of him throughout that fight, boxed beautifully to that plan. I mean, that who was it? Jamie Moore? Is that his? You know, that he couldn't have executed a plan better than that. And, you know, and I'm really saddened that, you know, someone who had fought all their life and, you know, kind of worked their way to the top without getting much attention and notice. And that was his big moment. And he was let down by 3 judges. I don't know which fight they were watching. But do you see the rematch going the same way?
I've always liked Josh Taylor, and I've always liked Ben Davison. I do believe they'll step up their game in the second fight. It's kind of. Do you know what this reminds me of? Froch versus Groves. It was, you know, it was controversial the first fight. Howard Foster should have never stopped that fight. George Groves got the better of Carl Froch in that first fight. And when they went into the second fight, everybody said, "Yep, it's going to be the same as the first fight." And what happened? Totally different. I wouldn't be surprised Josh Taylor steps his game up in the second. He has to. You know, if Josh Taylor wins that fight and it's a close decision, I don't think he gains any credibility out of it. He has to go in there and put in a masterclass performance. And in my opinion, he's probably going to have to stop Jack Catterall this time. You know, because a lot of people, and I don't know why, you know, and I think it's unfair to Josh Taylor. He's lost a lot of his fan base. A lot of the people that supported him have.
Sadly, as well. I mean, he's had to suffer a lot of online abuse as well, which is not on. And it's not on him. You know that he got that decision, and you know, people, you know, we need to recognize that as fans, as passionate as we are. The fighters don't get to decide who wins and who loses. You know, they're grateful that, you know,
death threats to family, you know, online abuse is just
no, it's disgusting, man. Yeah.
But you ask me, I honestly think Josh Taylor will step it up in the second. He has to. But you know what? I worry for him because he looked drained in the last fight. I just think he's outgrown that division. I struggle to see how he still makes 140 pounds.
I thought he was going to step up to 147. I mean, that was the talk, wasn't it? Stepping up to 147, fighting a Crawford, getting in that mix of that welterweight division, you know, as exciting as it is. I was like, oh, okay. But Jack Catterall had other plans. What do I think is going to happen? Oh, you know what? It's so difficult to get that fight out of your head. I hope, you know, I want redemption. I want Jack. I mean, this is my heart speaking here. I want Jack Catterall to, you know, have his arm lifted at the end of it. No, nothing against Josh Taylor. I just think karma and everything, you know, what he had to endure and the sadness and what, you know, that Jamie Moore's kind of interview at the end, it was like, you know, a lot of boxing, you know, people who are involved with boxing, they can relate to that. They'd be like, man, you know, we couldn't have had a decision that went against us any worse than that. And, you know, Jamie Moore was even talking about even walking away from the sport, you know, if we continue to have that. So I hope Catterall can correct that and make it more convincing this time. But, you know, Josh Taylor's not a world champion for no reason. You know, he's been in some classic fights. I mean, remember his first fight, who did he fight against? The British guy, O'Hara Davis. That's when I first got to know him. Yeah, I mean, I thought this kid's got something special about him. And then he moved up and in opposition. And so it's going to be a better Josh Taylor performance. So Catterall needs to put on a better masterclass than he did last time to win, I reckon.
Only times are going to tell, but either way, I am really looking forward to that rematch when it does happen. Right, Ron, that's all we've got time for. Again, thank you very much for joining us for
my pleasure
podcast. Yeah, just stop pestering me about a pay rise and everything because it's not going to happen. You should be.
Listen, IFL's calling me, man. Coogan's on my case saying, "Come on, man, work for us."
Fuck off then. But no, Ron, seriously, always a pleasure having you on here. And guys,
Thank you.
again, a quick friendly reminder, please, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell for future Lights Out Boxing notifications. Check us out on all the social media platforms. And of course, make sure you check us out on Spotify and all the other audio platforms if you want to listen to this week's podcast whilst you're on your way to work or in bed or whatever tickles your fancy. That's all we've got time for today. Ron, thank you once again. And thank you for watching podcast 55 of the Lights Out Boxing podcast.